The last time I spoke to my niece, she sent me a drawing she made and said, "This one's just for you." I hung it on the fridge, not knowing that the accident would happen the next morning and it would become the last thing she ever gave anyone. My name's Alan. I live in a small town called Shelbyville, Indiana. Not much happens here, really. Life moves slow. Most folks know each other's names. We got 2 stoplights and a Dairy Queen that stays open late in the summer. It's the kind of place you figure is safe, where things like tragedy don't touch you. Until they do. My niece Carly was 6 years old. My sister Gina had her when she was 34 after 3 miscarriages and a divorce that nearly broke her. Carly was her miracle baby. To me, she was more than a niece. She was the one person who never judged me for not having my life together. I never had kids of my own. 2 failed relationships, a beat-up truck, and a 2-bedroom rental was all I had to show by 42. But Carly didn't care about that. She liked my weird old dog stories. She liked the way I let her eat Cocoa Puffs for dinner when I babysat. She used to say, "Uncle Al, you don't act like a grown-up. That's why I like you." That last night, Gina had asked me to come over and watch Carly while she caught up on sleep. She was working doubles at the hospital and looked like she was running on fumes. I said of course. Carly and I made mac and cheese and then went full craft mode with some old crayons I found in a drawer. She was drawing something wild, her tongue sticking out the side of her mouth in that way kids do when they're concentrating. Every now and then she'd look up at me, ask me what color dragons should be or if clouds could be green. I just let her go at it. And then she got quiet. Serious. She finished one of the drawings, looked at it like it meant something big, and slid it across the table. "This one's just for you," she said. It was a house with trees and flowers. A person standing out front with a dog. Stick figures, sure, but the smile on that figure was big. Too big. The trees had pink blossoms. "That's you," she said, pointing to the figure. "And that's Rex." My throat caught. Rex was my dog. Died 3 years ago. I hadn't mentioned him in a while. Somehow she remembered. I smiled. "You remembered Rex?" "Of course. You told me he liked chasing squirrels but always fell on his butt." She laughed. I stuck the drawing on the fridge with one of those old pizza magnets. "I love it, Carly. I really do." She grinned, proud of herself. It was the last thing she ever gave anyone. The next morning, 7:04 a.m., my phone rang. I was still in bed. I saw Scott's name flash on the screen. My brother-in-law never called me that early. Something in my gut twisted before I even picked up. He didn't even say hello. "Alan, it's Carly." There was a crash. My heart dropped. I sat straight up. What? What do you mean a crash?" He was crying. "A truck ran a red light. It hit Gina's car. Carly was in the back." I didn't hear the rest. My head started ringing. My hands went numb. I dropped the phone. I drove straight to the hospital. They didn't let me see her. Said she was already gone when the ambulance arrived. The truck hit her side. Gina's car was crumpled like paper. Scott was slumped in a chair, sobbing. Gina was sedated in a hospital bed. They told me Carly didn't feel anything. That it was instant. I didn't know how that was supposed to help. The days that followed were a fog. I slept on Gina's couch and made sure she ate. Scott drank too much. I didn't blame him. But then I started digging. Something didn't sit right. The man who hit them was named Eric Madigan. 49. Drove a black Ram truck. The papers said accident. But there were witnesses. I talked to one. A woman who worked at the Walgreens near the intersection. She said he was flying down the street. She said the light had been red for at least 2 seconds before he barreled through. I kept digging. Found out Eric had 3 prior DUIs. 3. His license was suspended 2 years ago, but somehow he still had a truck. He wasn't drunk that morning, but they found pain pills in his glove box. Prescription in his name, but 2 months expired. And then came the kicker. He was the cousin of a county commissioner. The DA didn't press serious charges. Reckless driving. Time served in probation. That was it. My niece was dead and he'd be out in a week. That's when something in me cracked. The hearing was over in less than 15 minutes. I watched Eric Madigan sit there like it was nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't look at Gina. He didn't even glance at the photo of Carly the judge asked to be shown for context. Just kept rubbing his neck like the whole thing was some inconvenience. Gina didn't go. She couldn't. She hadn't left the house in 3 weeks except to go to therapy. I went. I sat in the back and gripped the pew so hard my knuckles cracked. Eric's lawyer spun some story about him being tired, about early morning glare, how tragedy can happen even to the most careful among us. And the judge, who I later learned used to golf with Eric's cousin, nodded along like it made sense. Carly's name was said 3 times. Once in the charge, once when they listed her as the deceased minor, and once when the defense said Mr. Madigan is deeply sorry for the loss of young Carly. No apology. No remorse. Nothing from him. That was the day I decided something had to be done. I started with background. Public records, social media, old news articles. Eric had a lot of history that never made it to court. Bar fights. Restraining orders from an ex. A hit and run that couldn't be proven. He was the kind of guy people avoided at bars. Loud, mean, dangerous when drunk. I also found out he worked part-time at his cousin's auto body shop. Under the table, probably. I drove by a few times. Saw the truck, the same black Ram, parked out back behind the shop, still dented on the passenger side, still streaked with paint that wasn't his. He still had it. The truck that killed Carly. Just sitting there like nothing happened. That made me sick. One night, I parked across the street and waited. He came out after dark. Alone. Got in that same truck. And drove it. So much for license revoked. I followed him. He went to a bar 15 minutes away in a town called Acton. Parked in the back. Stayed there 2 hours. When he came out, he was stumbling. Got behind the wheel again. I called the police. No response. I waited 10 minutes and called again. Nothing. That's when I realized. No one was going to stop him. No one cared. I spent the next week planning. Not murder. I'm not that guy. But I needed him to feel what we felt. I needed him to hurt, to lose something. To face what he ran from. I started with his truck. Late one night, I parked nearby and walked over behind the shop. No cameras. I made sure of it. I let the air out of his tires. All 4. Took a knife and slashed the seat. Left a note tucked under the windshield. You think you got away. You didn't. 2 nights later, I went back. This time, I brought a can of paint. I sprayed the word killer across the hood in red. Next morning, Gina called me, her voice shaky. Did you do something? What do you mean? Scott just called. Said Eric filed a report. Said he's getting threats. Someone vandalized his truck. I stayed quiet. Gina whispered, if it was you, don't get caught. But then things got worse. I started getting followed. One night, after leaving Gina's place, I noticed headlights behind me for 6 straight blocks. A few nights later, someone keyed my truck outside my own house. Left a dead squirrel on the hood. Eric knew. Somehow he knew it was me. That's when I realized I had to be smarter. I couldn't just mess with his stuff. I had to get to him where it would really hurt. And I found a way. I started watching Eric's life. Not just him, everything around him. His cousin Ray, the one who ran the body shop, was crooked as hell. The kind of guy who'd fix your car with stolen parts and overcharge your insurance. I dug into county records, complaints filed, anything I could find. Turns out Ray had 2 active investigations against him from years back. Both closed without action. I pulled copies. Guess who filed to have them dismissed? The same county commissioner cousin. Whole family was rotten. That's when I stopped thinking small. Eric was a cockroach, yeah, but he lived in a nest. I wanted to burn it all down. So I contacted a guy I knew from high school, Darren. Used to be a tech nerd, now worked freelance cyber stuff, barely legal. I asked if he could find anything shady, emails, records, payments, anything. I paid him under the table. Took most of my savings. A week later, he came back with a flash drive. What was on it? Gold. Invoices that didn't match. Duplicate billing. False estimates. Ray was charging for work he never did, cashing in fake insurance claims, using cars that were never wrecked. There were even emails about fixing inspections on totaled vehicles. Some signed off by Eric. And there it was a proof Eric had fixed up the black Ram himself after the crash. That was illegal as hell with an open case, and even worse when the repair job was done without inspection. His cousin helped him hide the damage. That was my hammer. I printed everything. Dozens of pages. I made copies. I took one to the state insurance fraud office, another to the local news station in Greenwood. I dropped one in an anonymous mailbox at the sheriff's office. I even mailed one to Eric's parole officer. And then I waited. 3 days later, the shop got raided. I was parked 2 blocks away, sipping coffee. Unmarked cars, men in jackets with clipboards, workers lined up on the curb. I didn't see Eric, but I saw Ray come out shouting, red in the face, handcuffed. That night, the news ran a short segment. Local auto shop tied to insurance fraud scheme. No names yet, but they said the state was investigating. 2 days after that, Eric's name showed up in a follow-up story. Finally. But I wasn't done. Because Eric still had freedom. And Carly was still dead. I needed one more move. Not to kill him, but to take away his safety. His power. His sense of control. So I called a meeting. I invited Gina and Scott to the house. Laid everything out. What I did, what I found, how I burned them from the inside. Gina stared at me for a long time. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out something folded. It was a drawing. Carly's. Another one. A rough sketch of 3 stick figures holding hands, her mom, and me. I hadn't seen it before. She made this the same night, Gina said. Her voice cracked. I found it under her bed. Scott just sat there, red-eyed. So what now? He asked. And I told them. I had one more thing planned. What I had planned wasn't legal. I knew that, but I didn't care. See, there's a difference between revenge and justice. One feels better. Eric still had his house, his freedom, his smirk. But I knew from the records Darren found that he also had something else. An illegal gun. Not registered, not reported, but it showed up in one of his emails to Ray. That was enough. I called the tip line. Gave them everything. The time he drove drunk, the fake repairs, the email about the gun. I made it sound like I was a neighbor worried about strange activity. 2 nights later, police rolled up to his house with a warrant. They found the gun. They also found pills that didn't match his name and a bunch of cash hidden in his garage. Looked like he was dealing a little on the side. Guess he wasn't just an addict, he was a supplier too. They arrested him on weapons charges, probation violation, and possible intent to distribute. No more probation. No more walks free. They dragged him out in cuffs, his shirt half-buttoned, hair wild. Someone filmed it on their phone. It made the rounds on local Facebook pages. I watched it on repeat. He looked small. That felt good. But here's the part one didn't see coming. 3 weeks after the arrest, Gina stopped returning my calls. I went to see her. She opened the door, tired and pale, but she let me in. I know what you did, she said. All of it. I told you. No, she cut in. All of it. The vandalism. The emails. Even the anonymous calls. You didn't stop at justice. You kept going. You made it about you. That hit hard. I did it for Carly. No, she said again, tears in her eyes. You did it because you couldn't stand feeling powerless. And you dragged us into it. Scott lost his job last week. Someone linked us to the investigation. They think he leaked insurance info. He didn't, but now he's blackballed. I sat down. My chest felt heavy. I didn't mean, I know, she said. But it doesn't change it. I walked out that night and stood in front of her house. Looked up at the window that used to be Carly's. The light was off. She was gone. And so was everything that made me feel like a good man. Yeah, Eric went to prison. He got 5 years on the gun and drug charges. Ray lost the shop. Their name's garbage in town now. But in the end, I lost my sister. My only family. I still have Carly's drawing on my fridge. The one with the trees and the dog and the house that looks like mine. Sometimes I stare at it and wonder what she'd think of what I did. I like to think she'd understand. But the truth is, I'm not sure I do anymore.